Thank you, Dr. Blackwell. Let me say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, but certainly never good night, and certainly never ever goodbye, because I hate goodbyes from childhood. That's personal trauma. Therefore, I say unto you, hello, and how are you, and welcome to another offering, representation of it that's entitled "It's Time." And my name is the Reverend Nathaniel Wayne Martin, and I'm the pastor of the New Life Institutional Baptist Church. We're located at 8916 South Main. We're worshiping with our sister church, which has invited us in, the Shiloh Missionary Christian Church, pastored by my good friend, the Reverend Dr. Della F. Hollanders. And let me tell you, when the Baptists and the Charismatics get together, there's always a shouting in the camp. We invite you to come and worship with us when you're in the neighborhood, 8916 South Main, in the city of Los Angeles. As I said, this offering is entitled "It's Time." Because we have some other programs that we'll be doing, but this program is more of a social justice, takes more of a social justice bent, and we try to do practical application of the scriptures to real life conditions, circumstances, and situations that we as believers and saints of God have to confront and are compelled rather to deal with. I believe, we hold and we teach that we need to recognize that we live within a social structure that we are not in charge of, because we did not create this social structure. And I use the term create not in the sense in which God, we use it in reference to God, but in the sense of a human mind developing or bringing forth an idea to fruition. In this case, the concept of white supremacy or white superiority, as one may choose to recognize it. We deal with the social structure in the sense that within that social structure there is what we call a systemic racism, and it is not an abstraction. No, it is very much a concretion which you and I confront at various points in our existence, in our living circumstances. And so this broadcast, therefore, seeks to pull the covers back off of that amorphous systemic racism, and to give us a chance to confront examples of that evil face to face. We want to defang, as it were, systemic racism as it has been practiced in this country, in the United States of America. You've noticed, as I have noticed, that some of the most egregious cases of the last few years have not come so much out of the South as much they have come out of the North, in places like Minnesota, Missouri, and yes, Kenosha, Wisconsin. And the most current case that I am grateful that it has concluded favorably is the case that came out of Brunswick, Georgia, in the issue of the murder, the lynching, the assassination, the execution of little brother Ahmaud Arbery by the McMichaels, and aided and abetted by Mr. William Roddy Bryant. And all three have been found guilty. Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God intervening, and the hard, determined work of Mrs. Ahmaud Arbery's mother. And she was determined. I think her first name is Wanda Cooper Jones, and she got into it, and she didn't let it go. and she brought about some very disturbing discoveries as it relates to systemic racism. But that is why you and I have to be vigilant, as the scriptures tell us, and watchful and mindful. Paul says that we are not ignorant of his devices, but many times in our culture we are not as aware as we ought to be. Sometimes we have a bit of naivete and a bit of unmerited trust in the legal system, and that is not necessarily justified, because this legal system was not set up for our benefit. It was set up for the benefit of those who set it up. And at that time, of course, we the people, as the Constitution defined them, were only landed growers, planters, growers, that class of white men. It was not for white women. It certainly was not for the slaves, and not even for the freedmen, which that lived in the country at during that same period of time. Certainly not for the Native Americans, as we have designated them, and the like. But it was exclusive domain of, like I said, the landed white planters, growers, and the like. And that has included, and that has, so to speak, descended or come to us to this very day, in this very hour in which I am addressing you. And the cases of injustice against my people in this nation are legion, not legend, but legion. And yes, it is legendary, going back to my first awareness in 1955, the murder of Emmett Till. And of course, those of us who have studied history and have studied the cases, we know those cases go all the way back into antiquity, into the very foundation of this nation. There have been these continued injustices, yes, including the butchery, the savagery, the genocide committed against the First Nations, the American Indians, so-called, and they continued against the people who were enslaved and forced to work without wages, work without compensation for over 246 years until the 1860, to the commencement of the Civil War, the passing of the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, and the subsequent conclusion of the war in 1865, in which Mr. Lincoln was able to get the 13th Amendment to the Constitution passed, and even that is a great story, because that was the second attempt to get a 13th Amendment. The first 13th Amendment that was offered would have solidified slavery down to this very hour, and Congress and no other legal body would have been able to make inquiry, regulate, control, or in any manner have any way to manage the slaveocracy. That was the original 13th Amendment. Thank God, in his divine providence, he overruled that evil, that compromise that was put forth by Mr. Crittenden and by Mr. Cortland in an attempt to divert the Civil War. God don't like ugly. Our scriptures that I would like to lay beside one another today, Ephesians chapter 6, always verses 11 and 12, the ones that tell us we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against what? Principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. I reference you to that scripture. And what we find as you and I are impacted by the society is that there are many seemingly harmless principalities, but yet they can do us great harm. Now, we need to define a principality. What is a principality? A principality, of course, is any organization or any agent or any person representing on behalf of said organization that has been delegated or invested with any degree of authority, any degree of legal, as it were, power. And that includes all of these folks that we see riding around in these cars with these insignias on them. It include people who consider themselves peace officers. It includes people who sit behind desks that exercise any level of authority. They are not the power, don't get me wrong. The power that Paul said, that's why he's talking about the rulers of the darkness of this world. The power is always shrouded, as it were, in darkness. You don't know who you're fighting, but Paul said you are not wrestling against flesh and blood. So in the life in which we are looking at, the example I'm going to use, of course, is the Brunswick, Georgia case. We find a very pronounced manifestation, but very clearly recognizable example of systemic racism. How do we say that? When Mr. Travis McMichael and Mr. Greg McMichael decided that they would hunt, and they said they were going to capture, but they killed Mr. Ahmed Arbery. Mr. Greg McMichael had been a former police officer and a police investigator for the Brunswick, Georgia district attorney, Glenn County district attorney, who was at that time Miss Jacqueline Johnson. And I think he had worked in that office for over 30 years. Point is, when they had killed Ahmaud Arbery, it wasn't very long on that same night, that same day, that Mr. Gregory McMichael called the district attorney for the county of Glenn County attorney, and asked to speak with her. She didn't pick up the phone, but he left a message. Said, I need to talk to you, call me back. My son and I have shot somebody, and we need to get some advice. Now, that's a good example of systemic racism at work, but it gets worse, of course, as it always does. I put a pause there because I couldn't call the DA if I had shot somebody. You couldn't call the DA if you had just shot somebody. And when the police came, rather than the police arresting Mr. the McMichaels, either one, no, the police asked them what happened. As a matter of fact, if you listen to the audio, which is caught on their body cam footage, the body cameras are running, and the body cameras give audio and they give video. But you can hear the first officer on the scene, whoever he's talking to, he says, yeah, I heard the shot. I was at the bush over here, and I come around, and it took me a couple of seconds to figure out what was going on. And I thought I saw the body laying there and everything. But at no time does he say that he went to either arrest or take the gun away from Mr. George McMichael, or to take the gun away from Mr. Travis McMichael. No arrests were made. If you look at the video, it is quite telling that you can observe systemic racism at work in the cover-up. Without using the word cover-up, they're beginning to frame the scene. and get control of the scene. And in normal police work, as we said, if the policeman came up on me with a gun, and he had just heard a gunshot, and he saw somebody laying there dead, he's probably going to shoot me right away if I got the gun in my hand. If not, he's going to tell me to put my hands up, get on the ground, put handcuffs on me, and all that type of thing. SOP, right? Not in this case. In this case, there was no arrest made. As a matter of fact, the killing occurred in February 23rd of 2020, and neither of the McMichaels were arrested until the month of May. Now you got February, and you got March, you got April, you got May. Wow, that's almost 4 months later before anybody gets arrested. And this is a manifestation, a graphic manifestation of systemic racism and how it works. It doesn't happen in the abstract. It happens concretely. And you can observe that these principalities, which every one of those policemen is a principality, the power rests in the hands of the elected officials, which in this case the district attorney. They've got what? The power, the ultimate power, of course, is in the people of the state of Georgia. But they have delegated power to the police authority and delegated power to the investigative authority, which would be the district attorneys for the various municipalities. And in this case, as I said already, Mr. Greg McMichael, after watching his son and helping his son and aiding his son in the chase and in the killing, murder, butchery of Mr. Ahmed Arbery, he calls the DA and talks with the DA about the what he has just done. So I need to get some advice. Wow. Talk about having privilege. Privilege that you and I would never get, would never have. We'd never be able to call the district attorney and say, I need some advice, I just shot somebody. And sadly, the district attorney did her best, out of sight, out of mind, to cover up and set things for Mr. Greg McMichael and his son Travis to not even be arrested. As a matter of fact, she sent word to the police on the scene, because the police on the scene naturally were in contact with the DA. They wanted to know what to do. And the district attorney told them, don't arrest them, Mr. Travis McMichael or his father. And so you take all of that together and you can look at the extent, you begin to see the unseen hand presence of systemic racism that is at work in a microcosm right there, but in a macrocosm all over the rest of this country, and indeed, as Paul said, spiritual wickedness in high places. And surely in the DA's office, you had spiritual wickedness at work in the cover-up. And when this district attorney, Jackie Johnson is her name, this is the charge that she was ultimately charged with. She was charged by the state of Georgia for violation of her oath of public office and obstruction and hindering of a law enforcement officer. In other words, she had subtly sought to get the police not to arrest the McMichaels, and she was successful. And she very cunningly recused herself and passed it off to the district attorney in Waycross, Georgia, Mr. Barnhill. And she was friends with Mr. Barnhill. She was friends with Greg McMichael. He had worked with her, as we said. And so when she passed it off to Mr. Barnhill with in close counsel with Ms. District Attorney Johnson, said to the police, which would be the arresting authority, I don't see any cause, I don't see any necessity, I don't see any evidence that would cause us to arrest the McMichaels. And when the autopsy came out, excuse me, of the cause of death of Ahmaud Arbery, then of course the district attorney in Waycross, Georgia, conspiring with the recused district attorney in Glenn County, again sought to obstruct and hinder the progress of justice in the Ahmaud Arbery case. Remember, nobody's been arrested. Nobody's been arrested. The district attorney said we find no cause for an arrest to be made. Remember, one district attorney has cunningly recused herself, but she has handed it off to a friend of hers. And mind you that this Barnhill had actually, his son had actually worked in this district attorney Jackie Johnson's office. So you see how one hand washes another, how this, what Paul talks about, this spiritual wickedness in high places, how it works together and colludes and conspires, often innocently in appearance, but it is not so innocent as it often appears. Now, lest you think that Paul is against the law, listen what Paul says in Romans chapter 13. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Now remember, when he writes to the Ephesian church in the 6th chapter, he tells them, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." So he does not make an absolute. He is not. He is too experienced to believe that the powers that be are always acting in a godly fashion. Even as he tells you here, the powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. Notice what he says in verse 3, "For rulers are not a terror to good works." Now, remember, this is the same, the Apostle Paul, who has been hounded by the Sanhedrin and by various other types of councils. And so when he is writing in the book of Romans, he's talking about what? Trying as good as possible, as much as possible, to live a godly, peaceable life, to try to get along with these folks, if it's at all possible. But contrast that, again, what he acknowledges in the book of his letter to the Ephesian church. We're not wrestling with flesh and blood. But we're wrestling with what? With what? Principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness of this world, spiritual wickedness in high places. He has to juxtapose two realities which you and I also experience. As they say, we know there's got to be some good policemen out there. They can't all be these low-down, dirty types of people. But yet, on the other hand, we know that there are some low-down, dirty legal personalities. And not just the police. We find, as in this case in Brunswick, Georgia, that even the district attorney is going to be held for prosecutorial misconduct. I like what Paul says in verse number 3, because he's speaking of an ideal. For rulers are not a terror to good works, right? Remember in the book of Proverbs it says, righteousness exalteth a nation. That's the ideal. But sin is a reproach to any people. That's the reality. All right. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is, verse number 4, for he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain, for he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Now that is the ideal that we strive for in society. We want our law enforcement people, we want our soldiers to be of the best caliber and the best quality, and to be honest and truthful and good and do right. But we know, as Paul recognized in Ephesians 6, you got some rascals out there. You got the people with the power who empower the principalities. And remember, when Paul, the first time Paul uses this word principalities is over in the book of, earlier in the book of Romans in the 8th chapter, where he says, I am persuaded that neither death nor life nor angels nor principalities and the like shall separate us from the love of God. He's a very thoughtful man, and when he condemns the powers in Ephesians, he's not talking about the ideal. He's talking about the reality of those who take power and use it unjustly for their own benefit, for their own self-aggrandizement, for their own enrichment, in many cases, to the detriment of the society. And that is what is the tension that you and I have to confront every day as we live. We're looking for good folks, but sometimes we know we're going to run up on them bad folks. And this is the reality that we as children of God are confronted with. We can't walk around with what you call them, pink glasses or whatever it is, rose-colored glasses, saying that everything is la la la, because it is not the case. We have a fight. Paul himself said, you put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand against the wiles of the devil. And he wouldn't tell you to put the whole armor of God on if you wasn't going to have to get into a fight. And so when you see the social activists and you see something wrong happening around you, you got to speak up. You got to say something about it. As we wrap up, we are coming into the month of December, and we've been doing this since 2017, I believe. And we thank God for the duration and the endurance, and we are pressing on. And I want to come in and encourage our brothers and sisters that are laboring. Labor now is becoming very valuable, recognized as valuable, because so many people that used to work have stopped working because they found out that they were on a treadmill and they wasn't getting nowhere. They were making the other fellow rich while they remained poor and poverty-stricken and getting worse and worse, even with a paycheck. And now things are beginning to get to the point where the people who want to make money got to pay the help, pay the laborer for her and his work. And so that is a great improvement in our nation. We're not anywhere near where we ought to be, because we have, the people of ill will have been so successful in pushing us backward. But continue to fight. And as I wrap up and get out of here, I want to tell you again, you're working for somebody and they don't want to pay you, don't work for them. Thank you, little brother. Lock it up.